Did anybody hear the story about the guys that there was an accident down in Keys? All three of them went into a manhole. All three of them didn't come back out alive. Apparently, there was, I think, a methane gas buildup in there, and they didn't follow the proper confined space entry procedures. First guy went in, and he went down. Second guy went in to rescue him, and he went down. Then a third guy went in to rescue them, and he's dead also. Firefighter came in once, EMS arrived on site. He even went down in the hole, but he was lucky enough to where they were able to get him out before he went down and basically died just like the rest of the guys. So that's the reason why I went ahead and chose confined space today, because I just want to refresh everybody's memories on what you need to do anytime you go down into what could be considered a permit required confined space.
That was a storm drain, not a sanitary drain, correct?
I think it was, but that's, look at that, storm drain, not sanitary. As sanitary, you would definitely consider, all right, there's, gases, it could be a hazardous atmosphere. Storm drain, not so much. But anytime you go into a space where there's potential atmospheric hazards, whether it be oxygen deficient or oxygen enriched, or if there's a toxic atmosphere, you always need to monitor the air quality first before you end up going down in there. So if there's any reason to believe why there could be something like that exists in the hole, you check it first, you test it first. Because if you don't, you can go through the same scenario that these guys went through. You go in, somebody else goes in, somebody else goes in. It's a damn catastrophe, as far as I'm concerned. Totally tragic, but totally also could have been preventable. All they had to do was stick a gas monitor down in there for 5 minutes, and all three of them probably still be alive today, but they didn't. Here's a definition of a confined space for you. This is how OSHA defines it. It's large enough so configured that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work, has limited means for entry or exit, and it's not designed for continuous occupancy. Pits. You ever go in any pits? I'm sure you do. What about structures? Wouldn't you consider that a pit? Yeah, absolutely. Horizontal confined space, pipe. You don't necessarily have to consider what confined spaces. You have to consider possible hazardous atmospheres. What about if it's hot as hell one day and somebody passes out and they're in a horizontal confined space or a pipe? How are you going to get them out? How are you going to pull them out? Have a rope. Have retrieval. That's what it all comes down to. Is a retrieval device, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy. It doesn't have to be a tripod or anything, and especially for a horizontal confined space, tripod wouldn't work very well. All you'd have to do is have somebody hooked up to a harness, hooked up to a lifeline, a line that you can pull them out with, and there's your retrieval. Just a means of getting them out of the hole without putting yourselves in danger. Because you don't know what they could have passed out from. It could have been heat stress, could have been a heart attack, could have been methane gas. Precast manholes. You ever find yourselves in any of those? It's a rhetorical question, but what I want to reiterate here, we'll kind of drive home is that all this stuff applies to what you guys do. You need to take necessary precautions to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen to you like what happened to those guys in the Keys. Permit required is a confined space which after evaluation is found to contain actual or potential hazards. Actual hazards, obviously, when you first start monitoring the hole, or it's thought that hazardous atmosphere is present, the hole could be fine in the morning, and then later on, maybe you're next to a roadway, maybe you're next to some place where there's a lot of exhaust, then it could change. And that could be considered a potential permit required confined space. That's a potential hazard. So you'd have to basically go about it the same way as you would any other regular permit required confined space, because it's okay before in the morning, but later on it changes. You have to take those things into consideration. You have to monitor it. All right. Permit required confined spaces contains or has the potential to contain a hazardous atmosphere, contains a material that has the potential for engulfing an entrance. What can engulf you? How about dirt, sand? If you've got a trench, it's narrow, it hasn't been sloped, you're not using a shield or a trench box, and it caves in on you, that would be considered engulfment. But they also talk about, water can engulf you, and toxic atmospheres can also engulf you. Has an integral configuration that could trap or asphyxiate an entrant by inwardly converging walls or by a floor which slopes downward and tapers to a smaller cross section. Contains other serious safety or health hazards. Lift station. These things, they scare me anyways. I mean, they're deep. Some of them are deep, real deep. Some of them I've seen, like 15 feet?
Maybe 25?
Holy cow. 25 feet. That's a long climb. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And something like that, if somebody goes down into it, like I was saying before, how are you going to get them out? They pass out from heat stress or heat stroke. If they're not attached to a lifeline, if they're not attached to anything, if they don't have a harness on, how are you going to get them out of the hole? Entry permits include, anytime you find yourself working in a confined space, permit required confined space, you have to fill out a permit. Basically, all a permit is just a checklist of everything you go through. Everything you need to check before you actually enter that hole or enter that space. Now, when it comes to a permit required confined space, you have to have an attendant. An attendant, basically, they sit there up at the top of the space and they monitor everything that's going on. And they're also in constant communication with the person that's in the hole. And an attendant, they can't do anything else. They can't be on the phone talking to somebody. They can't have any distractions whatsoever. Their main job is just to sit there and focus on the person that's in that hole. All right. Also, the last thing we're going to do is have the low man on the totem pole be the attendant, because they have to know the hazards associated with the space. And they have to know the person that's in there. Like, for example, Thomas, I know Thomas, he goes into the space and I know his behavior. So if I sit there and I say, hey, Thomas, how you doing in there? How you doing in there? And he says, 3-piece chicken tenders with a Coke and fries, because he's exposed to gases and stuff and they start playing with his brain, I know that, okay, well, he's not good, so I'm going to go ahead and start pulling him out. Now, shouldn't joke about that either. So if you find yourselves in a confined space later on and we're going through the whole scenario, don't joke around and say basically what I just did. Then I'll have a cheeseburger and fries and serious business, just do it right, no jokes. But I have to know him and know his behavior so that if anything's out of order, if anything doesn't seem right, I can go ahead and start cranking him out. All right. Remains outside the space during operations until relieved by another attendant, which you can totally do. You can swap people out. They just have to do the same thing that the first attendant was doing. They have to know the duties of an attendant. And like I said, you don't want to be in the low man on the totem pole. Okay. Communicates with authorized entrants and monitors activities inside and outside the space. So I understand that you want to concentrate and focus on what's going on with the guy inside the hole, but also you need to be aware of your surroundings outside the space. Just, take a peek around, see what's going on, see if there are any hazards that you could be exposed to, that the attendant could be exposed to. Say like vehicular traffic, that's potential. So, also he's someone's rescue, and this is important in that the attendant has to have the authority to summon rescue. So if I'm the attendant, Thomas has gone down, I can't call John and say, hey, John, this is what happened to Thomas. Should I call 911? Let's say, for example, if John's running an errand, which, probably wouldn't be doing and, that type of work. But they have to be able to summon rescue. One thing I want to say about rescue is, and I've said this before, since you're already on site, you're the ones that are able to act quickly. You're the ones that are able to respond faster than EMS can respond. So if you've got a guy in a hole and he's sitting down there and you don't have a retrieval device, well, you should have a retrieval device on him. But you need to know how to get that person out of the hole as fast as possible without putting yourselves in danger, because it could take 5 minutes for emergency medical services to arrive on site. And by that time, whoever's in there probably be dead, depending on what they're exposed to. If it's a heart attack, definitely. If it's asphyxiation, if it's definitely. Because what happens with EMS, they arrive on site 5 minutes later, they put on all their gear. Of course, they're notified. They have some little knowledge of the situation and that, okay, this is what's going on, but they still have to get there and they still have to put on all their gear. And they're not going to put themselves at risk or put themselves at as little risk as possible. When you think about it, all that time has gone by while that person is still sitting down there. So that's why it's best for you guys to be able to act on site without putting yourselves in danger as much as possible. I don't want to say as much as possible, just don't. If you do it right from the get-go, you won't even have to put yourselves in. Yeah.
Shouldn't everybody be certified in first aid and CPR though?
I would recommend it. It's not a requirement, but I'm a huge advocate for CPR, first aid. That way you can go ahead and you can start taking care of the problem right there while you're on site. Of course, whenever somebody gets cut or something, it's pretty nasty when first thing happens is his shirt comes off and you wrap it up. But as far as CPR is concerned, absolutely. If you're able to get somebody out of the hole and you're able to start working them, work them. You don't have to do mouth-to-mouth resuscitation anymore. They say it's no longer really a huge requirement in CPR, so long as you do chest compressions. That should be enough until emergency medical services arrive on site and they can take over from there. But during that time, as you're sitting there giving them chest compressions, you're improving the situation. You're improving their chances, their odds of actually surviving. And help, you may even bring them back to life. So that may be something that we could, discuss later on. Discuss with Ann and Jackie. Hazards. 47% is asphyxiation, 21% is drowning, 19% toxic liquids, 10% blunt force trauma, 2% electrocution, and 1% burns. But yeah, 47% is asphyxiation. You know what happens when the soil caves in on you? It's like how people die from asphyxiation. It just caves in around your body. And you can sit there and have a conversation with somebody with their head sticking out, but it'd be a short one if you didn't start digging them out, because that soil, every time you exhale, that soil's moving in and it won't allow your lungs to expand. So you do this, and before you know it, it's lights out. Same thing like a python or a constricting snake. It's just every time you exhale, closes in, gets tighter. But also, as far as asphyxiation is concerned, you've got carbon dioxide, but that stuff, it sits. Carbon dioxide is pretty nasty stuff, and before you know it, it just displaces all the oxygen in your lungs, and you just stop breathing, and that's it. You can't breathe. There was that situation also up in Sanford several years ago where it was the same scenario as the three guys that went in the manhole, except this one, it was an assistant manager for McDonald's, and it was a gas technician for Nuco 2, which Nuco 2, they resupply all the gases for like restaurants like McDonald's, Panda Express, which I don't see anything around here. Anyhow, one day they ran out of gas for the soda machines. So Nuco 2 comes up, the technician comes up, Assistant manager's there, he says, oh, I got a problem, can you help me out? He says, yeah, okay, I'll just need to get into the box, get into the area where the tank is kept. Well, the tank is surrounded by, an 6 or 8 foot wall surrounding the whole tank. You get into a door. Now the top is open. The assistant manager didn't have a key, so he's like, oh man, what do I do? Can you help me out? And the new code 2 guy says, no, I'm really not supposed to. My boss just told me I can't do this, but he wanted to be a good helper, wanted to help out. So he grabbed a ladder, put it over the top of the wall, gave the hose to the assistant manager. Assistant manager goes over, tries to make the connection. Technician is over on the truck, throws a switch. Here's that noise. So he knows there's no real connection there. So he goes over, climbs up the ladder, sees that the assistant manager, he's down. So he's like, oh crap. He goes up over the ladder, into the basin basically, and he goes down as well. So I know at times, we take a look at these things, oh man, I gotta do something right now. And it's hard to get away from that. It is, because, Thomas is there, John, Brad, Jackie, if you're in a hole, I want to jump in there and grab you too. But sometimes, Jay's shaking his head now. But sometimes we need to sit back and think about, okay, why did that person go down? I don't know. But honestly, you shouldn't have to jump down there if you follow the proper procedures for permit required confined space. Ladder workers die. They don't recognize the hazards. They just go up there like it's every other day. This is what we're gonna do, and we're gonna do it like the 50 other million times we've done it before. Except in this particular scenario, things have changed ever so slightly. And when they've changed ever so slightly, you don't recognize it, or you don't go through the motions, that's when you can suffer from it. They're not trained to protect themselves. They trust their senses, sight and smell, a lot of gases. They're odorless. They underestimate the dangers and they attempt a rescue out of concern for fellow workers, which I have gone over. Hazardous atmospheres can be asphyxiating, flammable, and toxic. 19.5 would be considered, less than 19.5% oxygen by volume would be considered oxygen deficient atmosphere. Excuse me. Exposures to atmospheres containing 12% or less will cause unconsciousness so quickly that individuals cannot protect themselves, meaning by the time they realize there's a problem, they're dead. Atmosphere containing more than 23.5 is actually oxygen enriched. And when you come into an oxygen enriched atmosphere, or fire there, explosions. So if you're in an oxygen enriched atmosphere, you want to light up smoke? No. Boom. Fire. Bad. Fire. Hot. Common gases. Carbon monoxide and hydrogen sulfide. Most common contaminant is carbon monoxide. It's colorless. It's odorless. It's slightly lighter than air, which means it sits. It takes it for a while for it to dissipate, for it to actually get blown out. I don't want to say blow out, but to dissipate on its own, it takes a little bit of time. Primary source is incomplete combustion, such as welding, burning, natural gas, propane, gasoline, and diesel engines. So if you've got a generator in an excavation or in a trench, or if you have anything basically that's burning off gasoline, that's creating carbon monoxide. And it's just filling up that space. What would be a better way to do it? If you actually absolutely have to use a generator, where would you want it? How about up top, where it's out of the hole? I know it sounds silly, but I've seen guys do it before. And you know what? They start feeling sick. They start feeling dizzy. If you're wondering why, well, that's why. Engulfment and drowning. When torrential forces are suddenly released or valves open, people may be unable to get out of the space before drowning. Sudden releases of fluids, solids such as granulated salt, sugar, or sand, liquids, and dense gases can cause engulfment of persons inside underground tanks or pits. Remember there was a story that my dad had told me, I think he heard it from Centerline. I don't know if he was a Centerline employee or if he was somebody else, but this was many years ago. Anyways, he was in a pipe, and for whatever reason, the water came on, and he got flushed out the other end, but got banged up so bad inside that pipe, just from the water flushing him out, that he was just battered, and he died from it. Thermal effects: heat and cold, heat stress and heat stroke, noise, distraction, stress, hearing damage, vibration, structural, corrosives. These are all physical hazards. There's other hazards you gotta be aware of too. What about brown recluses? Snakes. Yeah. Alligators. That's all right, John will take care of those alligators. Snake skin. There you go. Rattlers. All right, Thomas, I want you in there in 3 minutes or less.
Give me a shovel.
I wouldn't even mess with that, man. No, thank you. No, that's a den of rattlers. Yeah. No thanks. I think snakes are cool, but I don't want to mess with them.
Sure.
You just got bit in Palm City.
Oh yeah. Rattlesnake.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen one in quite some time. Not since I moved out of Jonathan Dickinson. So, but we would used to play football in the backyard, and someone would, kick the ball, shank it into the woods. And I remember I went over there to pick it up. Big old fat Eastern Diamondback just sitting right there next to it, right next to the football. Oh man, now we can't play anymore. But yeah, you need to be aware of some other hazards other than gases, oxygen deficient, oxygen-rich atmospheres. There are spiders, there are snakes, there are alligators. There are things that are poisonous. Be mindful. Here's some controls. Ventilation is very easy. Get a blower down the hole. Isolation and inerting or flushing. Ventilation: consider needs to be given to volume of space, capacity, and ventilating device and distribution of air within the space. So if you've got a space where it could accumulate a lot of gases or a lot of vapors, and you've got a small little ventilation device, can't think of a word right now, that may not be adequate, may not be enough. You may need something bigger. Locate the blower a safe distance from confined space. Blower, that's the word I was looking for. Jesus. All right. Ensure the air supply is not contaminated. So if using a portable generator to power the blower, make sure the exhaust is positioned downward from the confined space, which is kind of what I ran into earlier, what I touched on earlier with like the generator being in the hole. Blower is the same thing if it's gas powered. It's hooked up to the generator. Make sure that it's up there, up top. If flammable atmosphere exists or may develop, the ventilating equipment must be properly bonded and intrinsically safe to prevent a static discharge. I thought DS Aikens across the street, I thought it was pretty cool. They came up with an idea where they had their generators attached to a grounding rod. All it was a piece of rebar with a piece of wire running in there. And when they're using the generator, they just hammer the thing right into the ground, and that was it. It was grounded. Very simple. Positive ventilation. Here's your electric blower. High power, that'll get her done. Monitoring. Monitoring must be performed before entry, continuously during the entry, and record readings periodically according to your permit process. So this is whenever you're using a gas detector. You're in a space where you know you need to monitor the atmosphere continuously. You need to take down readings because it may change throughout the time that you have somebody in that space. Most common things to measure is oxygen, combustible gases, hydrogen sulfide, and carbon monoxide. Hydrogen sulfide is stinky stuff. Don't assume that the toxic gases present in any confined spaces are limited to only hydrogen sulfide or carbon monoxide. Many multi-gas monitors can measure up to 6 gases simultaneously. Here's an example of a 4-gas detector. Does everybody have a gas monitor? Does each crew? No? That needs one.
We have one right now.
You have one. Is it calibrated?
Mhm.
Okay.
It's pain in the ass, yeah.
10 years ago.
Well, in any event, I'll just tell you that if you do have gas monitors, I always recommend them in each crew, but you don't have to have one on each crew. But the most important thing is the thing works. If you do have a gas monitor, make sure that it's calibrated. Whoever's in charge of calibrating it, do it. That way, whenever somebody needs it, you've got it, and you're good to go. Because the last thing you want to do is use a gas monitor that isn't calibrated because it'll give you a false reading. And if it gives you a false reading, that means that obviously it's not true and correct. So it says, oh yeah, sure, the atmosphere is well within these parameters. Not calibrated, somebody goes down in there and you find out that it's oxygen deficient or it's oxygen enriched. Or that there's, an excessive amount of methane gas or carbon monoxide. If it gives you a false reading, it just opens up the possibility for death, is the way I see it. Test instruments must be maintained and calibrated in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. Annual factory calibration is typical, along with pre-use calibrations using certified test gas mixtures. Gases heavier than air tend to lie low. Gases lighter than air tend to rise and accumulate along the top, and gases that weigh the same as air tend to disperse within the atmosphere. Rescue. It's very simple, it's very easy. So long as you have somebody attached to a harness, attached to a lifeline, and that lifeline is somewhere where you can get it and you can either manually pull them out by hand or lift them out with a track hoe or a backhoe, or if you have a retrieval device, all you basically need to get somebody out is have them attached to a rope. I don't want to say tying the thing around their waist, don't do that. Make sure they're wearing a harness, and it's real easy, and it only takes you 2 minutes to put on a harness and to attach it to a lifeline and hang it out the end wherever you're gonna be retrieving somebody from. And it's so simple. It's that there shouldn't be any reason why anybody couldn't be retrieved out of a space if they go down. Because you guys, you've got the equipment, you just need to use it. Evaluate rescue services' ability to respond in a timely manner and based on the hazards identified. Only properly equipped and trained personnel may enter confined spaces to make rescues. Properly equipped. See all that stuff they're wearing? You see the guy off to the left? He's got the mask on. He's got the hoses, everything. He's got the harness, the whole nine. And you see how he's going down into the space right there? How long do you think it would take for him to put that stuff on? To rescue somebody.
He's not going at a manhole like that.
If you look at him, he's.
I see how he's dressed, but you're not going at a manhole with a tank on your back.
No,
It'll fit in there.
won't fit. Well, he doesn't, I can't see that he's got a tank on his back. I think he's,
All you see is his helmet
yeah,
in the manhole,
I think he's hooked up to an air supply up top.
and that's what they have to do.
Probably was a 4-foot diameter open too. Huge with it.
Anyhow, the point is for him to put all that stuff on, after the 5 minutes it takes for them to get there, plus another, 2-3 minutes for them to put the stuff on, there's 8 minutes. And that's 8 minutes that the person's been in the hole. Plus the time where, okay, you've got to factor in the human element and that, oh, what do we do? Something happened. Okay, then the minute goes down, minutes lost there. So you're looking at 9 minutes, 10 minutes. By that time, whoever's in there is either dead or close to it. Tripods are simple machines, they work. All right, at what point is an atmosphere considered oxygen deficient? What was the percentage?
19.5.
19.5. What makes a confined space a permit required confined space?
Limited entry and exit.
Yep. Also, two, if there's any hazards for engulfment, atmospheric hazards, that's what really makes it permit required. Meaning you have to fill out that checklist and you have to go through all the procedures before you enter that space. What is one of the primary hazards of an oxygen-enriched atmosphere? When performing atmospheric monitoring, what are common hazards to test for? Carbon monoxide, hydrogen sulfide, methane gas. These are things you gotta consider because people have died from them. So just make sure that doesn't happen to you. Any questions?